And cloudy, some drizzle over the hills in the west, and temperatures again above average, 11, 12, maybe 13 degrees Celsius. Look at the numbers for Sunday, though. We are going to see a dip in temperatures, turning cooler this weekend, but also plenty of sunshine on Sunday.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB Plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous.
Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark Dolan. Welcome to what will be a very busy show. Full reaction to the news that interest rates are to be the highest in a decade and what that means for you and for me and the economy. With wholesale energy prices now lower than they were before the war in Ukraine, why are we paying so much to heat our homes? Crunching the numbers so you don't have to is former statistician from the ONS, Jamie Jenkins. Are the government right that inflation is coming down? As Australia remove our new monarch from their latest $5 notes, is King Charles losing his grip on the Commonwealth? Is this his first major setback as king? Does it prove he hasn't quite got the pulling power of his late great mother? I'll be asking top royal author Ingrid Seward. In my big opinion, 100 days of Rishi Sunak, my verdict, and reaction from the former editor of the Sunday Mirror, Paul Connew, live in the studio. And following the departure of the hugely popular Ken Bruce, and as Radio 2 sees an exodus of listeners to golden oldie radio stations, they've lost 500,000 listeners in just a quarter of a year. Is the BBC institutionally ageist? I'll be debating that with legendary former Radio 4 presenter Nigel Rees, who has been railing against the BBC's obsession with youth and diversity. Lots to get through, including my big opinion. But first, the headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Mark, thank you, and good evening to you. The top story on GB News tonight, as you've been hearing, the Bank of England has raised its base rate from 3.5% to 4% today. That's the 10th increase in a row, adding that inflation has begun to fall. It also says the UK is set to enter recession this year, but stresses the economic downturn could be shorter and less severe than previously thought. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, supported the Bank of England's decision.
But we recognise it is very difficult for families, businesses up and down the country when interest rates go up. But much harder for them would be if we didn't take decisive steps to bring down inflation. And that's why the Bank of England is absolutely right to do what they've done today. And we in the government must make sure we support them by what I do in the budget to make sure that we make it easier, not harder, for them to do what we all want to do, which is to halve inflation.
Lancashire Police say they've located a potential new witness in the search for Nicola Bulley. That's after they had released an image of a woman who was seen in the area where the mother of two disappeared. The 45-year-old went missing last Friday in St Michael's-on-Wyre whilst walking her dog. As part of the hunt for Nicola Bulley, divers are searching the River Wyre. Now, the Business Secretary is urging energy companies to suspend the practice of forcibly installing prepayment meters. Earlier, Ofgem announced it was launching an urgent investigation into British Gas after reports that contractors working for them had been unreasonably forcing the prepayment meters on vulnerable customers. The boss of British Gas owner Centrica says he's horrified. Energy and Climate Minister Graham Stewart says it's appalling.
Brought in all the suppliers last week to talk about how we better look after vulnerable people, because there are clear rules and they have obviously not been followed, and therefore I need the regulator and I need the companies to do the right thing by people who are in the most difficult of circumstances and have been treated on this evidence appallingly.
Shell, the energy company, says its profits have increased by more than 53%, with earnings of more than £68 billion last year. That's the company's highest profit in its 115-year history. The energy giant has benefited from soaring oil prices due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. A Downing Street spokesman has said the Prime Minister understands people's anger over Shell's record profits at a time of soaring household energy bills. An independent inquiry into the 1998 Omagh bombing has been ordered by the Northern Ireland Secretary. The announcement follows long-running legal action brought by Michael Gallagher, whose son Aidan was killed in the real IRA bombing. 29 people died in the explosion in County Tyrone. Hundreds more were injured. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News, the People's Channel. Time now for Mark Dolan, sitting in for Laurence Fox.
My thanks to the brilliant Polly Middlehurst, who returns in an hour's time. A very packed hour coming up, my last one of the week. As our new monarch disappears from Australian banknotes, is King Charles losing his grip on the monarchy? More reaction to rising interest rates. What does it mean for you and for me? And is inflation genuinely coming down? And with wholesale energy prices falling, why are we still paying so much to heat our homes? Is it net zero? And following the departure of the legendary Ken Bruce, and as Radio 2 sees an exodus of listeners to golden oldie radio stations, is the BBC institutionally ageist? All of that to come, but first, my big opinion. 100 is a nice round number, isn't it? It's a century in cricket, a decisive break in snooker. And do you remember the good old days when £100 in your pocket was a lot of money before inflation kicked in? And by recent standards, remaining Prime Minister and actually staying at number 10 for 100 days is a bloody miracle. Sunak hardly got off to the best possible start, inheriting a pound in free fall an energy crisis and a probable recession. And he wasn't even elected by his own grassroots, so not exactly the strongest mandate for power either. But he hit the ground running with swift action to reassure the international financial markets about the bankability of the United Kingdom, which has settled nerves among the Rolex-wearing financiers upon whose largesse we are now sadly reliant. It's now significantly cheaper for Britain to borrow money because we are once again trusted as a reasonably safe bet internationally. And Sunak's obsession with inflation will likely bear fruit later this year and into 2024. With falling prices and a boost in the value of the pound in your pocket and your wage packet, things should be sunnier as the year goes on. It's clear that the highest tax burden since the war, a political choice, will add to our economic woes. We might avoid recession if we cut taxes and go for the Liz Truss route. Strong argument for that, particularly corporation tax. But Sunak begs to differ. He's made a judgment that tackling inflation is the only show in town. Everything else is mere detail. Now, this has been and will be the biggest call of his premiership so far. But if it's the right call, then Mrs. Sunak can start looking at new wallpaper for number 10. The Nadeem Zahawi tax scandal is a very bad look, to say the least. But once he had proof that the ministerial code was broken, Sunak again acted swiftly. Don't forget, Boris Johnson found it impossible to fire cabinet ministers and advisers, like Dominic Cummings and his ill-fated trip to Barnard Castle. Do you remember? He was testing his eyesight. He didn't get the sack. What about the disastrous Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson? Stayed in post far too long. And of course, Boris didn't even sack Matt Hancock when captured on CCTV having a snog fest during lockdown, breaking every rule you can think of. It's my view that when it comes to the strikes, the woke takeover of our society, the energy crisis and illegal migrant crossings, the alternative to Rishi Sunak, the cervix-free leader of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, hasn't got a leg to stand on. Or a cervix. With half the country effectively on strike yesterday, Starmer didn't even bring it up at Prime Minister's questions. Clear proof, if you needed it, that he is in the pocket of the unions. Now, today's news of a hike in interest rates is more bad news and an awful start to the year. Credit cards, loans, mortgages will all go up. But keep the faith. The tunnel is at its darkest before you reach the end. Perhaps fueled by Brexit derangement syndrome, in which the political and media elite will try to blame everything on our departure from the EU, Britain, in my view, has been a victim of huge pessimism when it comes to our post-pandemic outlook. Look no further than the surprise news that the economy grew in November by a small amount, I'll grant you, but more than the contraction that was predicted. And more news today that, in fact, we avoided recession altogether at the end of last year, and a shallower downturn is anticipated for 2023. So the mood music defies the critics. There are two key questions after 100 days of Rishi Sunak. The first one is about his political judgment. Well, by identifying the 5 key things that arguably matter most to the British people, I think he passes that test. He has promised, yes, promised, to tackle NHS waiting lists, to grow the economy, to reduce the debt, to halve inflation and to stop the boats. If Carlsberg did shopping lists, that one would surely qualify. Sunak knows what he's got to do, and he's got 2 years in which to make some serious inroads. The next question is about his character. Does he have the backbone to see this through? A zero-tolerance policy towards illegal migrant crossings will take legal and political courage. Cutting the debt will see Britain having to live within its means. Sunak will be fighting against powerful vested interests. Fixing the NHS will require bold and painful reform. And halving inflation will involve the mother of all fights with the trade unions as he pushes back on their inflation-busting demands. The strikes are a nightmare for Sunak, but they are an opportunity too, and could prove to be his Thatcher moment. In 2 years' time, with a choice of Prime Minister Sunak versus Prime Minister Starmer, I believe it's all to play for. Far from fearing the next election, if Rishi Sunak delivers on his 5-point plan, that election can't calm Sunak enough. 100 days could become 1,000. Let's get reaction to all of those issues with the former editor of the Sunday Mirror, political commentator and best-selling author of several books, including a book all about Boris Johnson. Paul Connew, welcome to the studio.
Good evening, Mark.
There you go. I'm offering a sunny outlook for Rishi Sunak. I would argue there's more than a narrow route to victory for him.
Well, your sunny outlook isn't really shared by the latest opinion polls, or indeed from many Tory MPs I know who are expecting not to be MPs beyond the next general election.
I think the entire political class and most of the media are stuck in a doom loop. They've been wrong about the British economy, which is apparently was in recession at the end of last year. It was not. We were going to have a deep and prolonged recession this year. We are not. That's the latest from the Bank of England today. And if Sunak tackles inflation, it's all to play for.
But of course, but Sunak isn't tackling inflation. Inflation will come down because of the Bank of England's role and international factors. It's not controlled by the government.
And Sunak's courage in facing down the unions. If your mate Keir Starmer was Prime Minister, we'd have inflation forever because he'd be saying yes to the RMT, yes to the nurses, yes to the teachers.
Come on, Mark. Sunak has... His biggest battle isn't against inflation. His biggest battle is against the internecine warfare within his own party, factionalised. And one of the reasons...
Well, Labour's not exactly a sort of harem of peace, is it?
Well, it certainly is by comparison. If you look now, Mark, in fact, the Tory party is in a chaotic state. And, of course, you've got the Boris Johnson plotters. Isn't it interesting that on the anniversary, the third anniversary of Brexit and the week of anniversaries of 100 days for Sunak, Boris is suddenly very high profile, ranging from Putin threatened to wipe me out with a missile. In fact, well, I think Putin, dreadful, terrible dictator and danger, but that was clearly a bit of black humour. And normally, tape recordings are taken when leaders talk to each other, certainly if it's the President of the USA. So let's hear the tape recording on that one. And while I agree with Boris's stance on Ukraine, let's not forget that Boris, back during the referendum campaign, actually mitigated for Putin's invasion of Ukraine and said it was EU expansionism that partly was to blame for it. He's changed his tune now, quite rightly, that particular viewpoint, in which he was accused of being a Putin apologist by a number of Tory MPs, let alone Labour MPs.
You're one of my absolutely favourite journalists, but you remind me of those commentators on CNN who are still banging on about Donald Trump, even though he's no longer president. The bottom line is that Boris Johnson...
Boris, he still wants to.
Well, perhaps, and maybe Boris's comeback is going to happen in parallel with Donald Trump. But I'm pretty sure that Sunak will fight the next election at least. After that,
well, they can't afford not to. I mean, this is becoming like an amalgam of the thick of it. Yes, Prime Minister and House of Cards.
Well, exactly. Now, let me say that I don't think Sunak deserves a standing ovation for his efforts so far, but perhaps
Well, his best qualification, Mark, is at least he's not Boris Johnson. At least he's not Liz Truss.
And I think maybe he gets a warm round of applause because he's settled the nerves of the international financial market.
He did that.
And he's identified the 5 key things that I would argue matter most to my viewers: stop the boats, grow the economy, cut the debt, sort out the NHS waiting lists, and just generally see the country get on a proper sound footing.
But that's an aspirational shopping list that very few economists think he is going to achieve. And, of course, he's in denial over Brexit's damage, very much in denial, while even his Chancellor, of course, who is a Remainer, is also in denial. This sort of yellow brick road to these sunlit uplands of Brexit just is not happening.
Well,
that is why the opinion polls are showing that the public have turned against Brexit.
I don't think Brexit can be judged in the context of a 3-year pandemic in which we borrowed £500 billion quid, paid people to stay at home.
Very easy to hide behind Ukraine
supply chain issues. In isolation, there is no doubt that there are Brexit impacts, but the long-term potential of Brexit remains. But let's get back to Starmer, because How is Starmer? Because I agree, I don't think that Rishi Sunak is exactly, he's not Winston Churchill, let me tell you. He's not even Margaret Thatcher.
And he's almost certainly going to have to lose Dominic Raab.
I would suggest to you, we'll come to Raab in a second, I would suggest that Sunak is better than Starmer in every department. Because when it comes to the unions, are Labour the answer to our industrial strife, given the fact that they're in the pocket of the unions? Are Labour the answer
let's
to
not exaggerate.
Let me get these points out. Are Labour the answer to what the woke takeover of our institutions, given the fact that Keir Starmer can't defend the women in his own party and can't define what a woman is even though he's married to one? Are Labour the answer to our energy crisis when they want to invest borrowed billions on flaky renewables?
We're going to have to go down the renewables route, so let's not sort of kid ourselves on that. But Starmer, I mean, I'm a Labour supporter who deserted the party during Corbyn's era, but. And I am critical at times, of Starmer, mainly because I think he is running scared of Brexit. It's pragmatic over principle, really, Mark, because it looks like there's going to be a Labour victory. So why even though the polls are turning against Brexit, he doesn't want to even flirt with that. But we are going, in the end, I'm in the strange position, as you know, of being a Remainer who predicted Leave would win the referendum in 2016 based on my rough and ready research in the red wall areas, but I also predicted the public would turn against it when the reality turned out to be very, very different from the missold fantasy of Boris Johnson. I mean, I was involved in a debate with Boris very early on in the referendum campaign when a member of the audience asked, in fact, a woman expressed, the fear that leaving the customs union and the single market would be so damaging. Boris didn't quite say Johnny Foreigner, but he did say that, don't worry, the EU will have to roll over and give us all the benefits of the single market and the customs union. He either knew then he was lying totally or didn't even understand the Brexit he was
Paul, complaining like so many of the media elite, you're obsessed with Boris, who's no longer Prime Minister. You're obsessed with Brexit.
But he thinks he's...
There are those Brexit's happened. We're out. Get over it. But listen,
I'm not advocating a second referendum or anything like that at the moment, but not the moment. But it may come in a few years' time. But that isn't a barrier to us negotiating a closer tie to the single market and the customs union. That is what this country needs.
You are one of the most respected journalists in the country, so I'm going to give you the last word on this. Why would you rather have 100 days of Keir Starmer rather than 100 days of Rishi Sunak?
Because I think Starmer would make a better Prime Minister. I think Rishi Sunak has done a decent job in stabilising the markets, but he hasn't got a vision.
Absolutely brilliant.
He's not a politician, he is a banker who is in politics.
I'm glad you said banker. We must get our dictionary.
Yes, I almost said something else.
These bloody Fleet Street journalists, they've got to watch their tongue. My thanks to Paul Connew, political commentator, best-selling author and former editor of the Sunday Mirror. Still to come, with wholesale energy prices falling, why are we paying so much to heat our homes? And as our new monarch disappears from Australian banknotes, is King Charles losing his grip on the Commonwealth? Is this his first major setback? But next up, following the departure of the legendary Ken Bruce, and as a Radio 2 audience dwindles by the hour, 500,000 listeners have gone to golden oldie radio stations in the last 3 months. Is the BBC institutionally ageist? We'll debate that with a former BBC star next.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
and right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the show. Great to have your company. Now, bad news for Radio 2 as they lose 500,000 listeners to golden oldie radio stations. That's just in 3 months. 500,000. This after news that the host of their biggest show, in fact, the biggest radio show in the country, Ken Bruce, is to leave the network. Is it because he's 71? This follows other high-profile departures from the organisation, including Simon Mayo, Steve Wright, Vanessa Feltz and Liz Kershaw. So is the BBC institutionally ageist? To debate this, I'm delighted to welcome legendary former Radio 4 presenter who, after leaving the channel, railed against Auntie's obsession with diversity. Nigel Rees, welcome to GB News.
Hello, Mark.
Great to have you on the programme. First of all, under what circumstances did you leave the BBC?
I wasn't sacked and I wasn't lured to great British hits or whatever it's called. I left because I'd been doing the programme for 46 years and we'd reached our 500th edition and I thought, time to go. But the actual prompt to leave was COVID because we weren't able to do it in the way we'd done it for 46 years with a studio audience. So that was the beginning of it.
Vanessa Feltz has said just recently in an interview with Lorraine on ITV that once you turn 60 at the Beeb, you become invisible. Was that your experience?
Well, it wasn't. And I'm 78 now, so when I
a very young 78.
Retired, thank you very much, Mark. When I retired, I said to the BBC, I want to end the show. So I wasn't fired. And, in fact, they wanted me to stay on.
So that's right. Does your story buck the trend, though? If you look at what's happened at Radio 2, it seems an obsession with younger listeners is, A, offending the public because they're actually losing audience share.
Yes.
And they're losing great talent like Ken Bruce, who shouldn't be leaving the organisation. The biggest show on UK radio.
If not Europe.
Yeah, correct. I've heard that,
Yeah. Well, I feel that the BBC is ageist. This pursuing the young audience, which is what they seem to want, I think is completely misguided. In a few years, I'm told that over half the population will be over 50. The average age of a Radio 4 listener is 55. So who is going to play to these people if you're just chasing after the younger and younger audience.
That's right, and these people have been paying the licence fee for decades.
Yes, but also it's more than that. My show, which really grew out of light entertainment, as it was called in the 1970s, rather like a parlour game, it doesn't fit well in the media environment of the moment. But I was, playing to these older listeners, if you like.
Yeah.
But the pressure on me was to go for the younger ones.
Do you think the BBC is dismissive of or even ashamed by its older listeners and viewers?
Well, I suppose you could say that. But they are infected with this, what I would call positive discrimination. And it doesn't only apply to age, it applies to all sorts of other things like diversity and even disabled. I was lent on very heavily towards the end of my programme to include people who are disabled. Now, the reason for that was, they said, 20% of the population is disabled, whatever that may mean.
Sure.
But the next point is that they thought that the guests who appeared on programmes, who appeared on radio and television, should somehow reflect the audience out there. I don't see there's any need for that. And I had a wonderful email from a woman who said that she spoke with an estuary accent, southeastern London accent. And she said, I speak with an estuary accent, but I don't want to hear the news read by somebody with an estuary accent. And I think this really applies right across the board. Just because you're disabled, do you really get anything from watching a disabled person on the TV or on the radio?
It's also this idea that young viewers and listeners want to have young broadcasters. Well, 8.5 million people currently listen to Ken Bruce's radio show. I would conjecture that some of them are young people who just think this guy is very talented and enjoy his show.
Absolutely so. And you can't tell, really, how old he is on the radio. No. And he sounds exactly the same to me as he
Why do you think he left? Let's indulge in some gossip, some tittle-tattle, some speculation. I want to be fair to the BBC, OK? First of all, they're going for this diversity because the BBC wants to represent the whole country in its output, and they will defend that. And the BBC is still watched by millions every day and listened to. So, it's a globally renowned product. So I don't want to attack the BBC too much. But Ken Bruce, he shouldn't be leaving the BBC. Why is he? I'm told his salary was 400 grand. Well, his rival on The Breakfast Show, Zoe Ball, who has fewer listeners, is on $1 million. OK, so is that part of the problem? And is that ageism? Because I don't think that would stand up in court, that a guy with a bigger show than his colleague is on half the money.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's absolutely bumming.
Is it ageism?
I think it's the way it's evolved. He's been there since 1973 or whatever.
Why is Zoe Ball, and by the way, great talent that she is, but she's got a smaller audience than a man on half her salary?
Yeah. Well, I expect...
He happens to be 71.
I expect they may be trying to adjust things, you see, because the BBC has always been under attack.
Out with the old, in with the new.
Yeah, but also raising salaries, making sure that females were paid as much as, if not more, than men. I mean, this has been going on
Perhaps
for a very long time.
Perhaps he should sue for sex discrimination.
Well, he could do that. But I don't think he wants to. And this wonderful offer came to him from Greatest Hits Radio, which is very, very successful. He won't get quite the same size of audience, but good luck to him.
Yeah.
I take my hat off to all these people who went off. It's just that I didn't. I just retired.
Rapid fire. Is the BBC politically neutral?
Should be.
A damning answer there, reading between the lines. And is the licence fee, does it continue to be justified? Is it long for this world, the licence fee?
I don't think it is, but I'm not terribly sure what the alternative is or should be.
Nigel, what a treat to have a bona fide broadcasting legend in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us. Do come back and see us again soon. Now, a BBC spokesperson has said Ken Bruce explained his reasons for leaving Radio 2 in his quote and on air. We respect his decision and wish him the very best of luck in the future, as he's been a much-loved part of the Radio 2 family. Radio 2 is hugely proud of having a range of presenters from their 30s to 80 years old on the station. an age range which hasn't changed in decades. In fact, Ken Bruce started presenting on Radio 2 at the age of 33. Radio 2 will continue to be a multi-generational radio station that serves a 35-plus audience, a target audience, which also hasn't changed in decades, with listeners tuning in each week to our brilliant range of programmes hosted by some of the UK's best-loved presenters. We continue to play a wide variety of the best music from the past 7 decades, including from the 60s and 70s. My thanks to the BBC for that response. I've got an idea. Why don't you hire Nigel Rees? Isn't he brilliant? Just imagine Nigel playing a bit of Phil Collins. One more night. Yes, please. Before 9, as our new monarch disappears from Australian banknotes, is King Charles losing his grip on the monarchy? Is this his first major setback? But next, with wholesale energy prices falling, why are we paying so much to heat our homes? Is it net zero by any chance? It's going to be a lively debate. That's next.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go. But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe.
Bring it on.
Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous.
Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Welcome back. As Britons struggle with the cost of living crisis, it's surprising to note the wholesale energy prices are now, in many cases, lower than they were before Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. So why on earth are we still paying through the nose to heat our homes and switch on the kettle? And hey, watch GB News on a flat screen telly. Well, to discuss this, I'm delighted to welcome, formerly from the Office for National Statistics, a man who crunches the numbers so you don't have to, political and economic commentator Jamie Jenkins. Hi, Jamie.
Hi, Mark. You good?
Very well. Great to have you in the studio. So give us a sense of the cost of wholesale energy prices and why they're not feeding through into our bills.
Yeah, well, it's a complex picture, obviously. So remember now, we look at the energy prices we're paying. It's basically, we've got a government set price. Ofgem is setting the price. Remember a few years ago, you'd be looking to switch to a better deal. It's pretty much one national rate out there at the moment. And the way Ofgem set that rate is they will track the wholesale price for about a 6-month period. So when we look at the kind of the rate that we're paying at the moment, that actually comes before this kind of high spike that we've seen over the winter. And remember now that energy prices are going to go up again in April because they'll be reflecting some of the higher prices that we got at the moment. Now, the bad news, because you've touched upon the wholesale gas prices coming down, or the bad news for those watching now, is the fact that when you think of where we are at the moment, the government is actually topping up our energy bills. So what it means is that when we look at the wholesale price coming down, when we get to April, it'll mean the government will save money. Ultimately, it's taxpayers' money anyway, but it won't feed through to bills. It might be towards the back end of the year when we start seeing the energy bills coming below what we're paying.
Because government support for people's bills, household energy bills, stops in April.
Well, they're going to still support a little bit of it, but it's going to be going up about 20% on what you're paying now. So the price cap will still probably be kind of what the government will be topping up, but the amount the government will pay will come down. Now, the problem we've got here, Mark, is the fact that over the last 40 years, the UK government has sleptwalked itself with the lack of energy security. And if you go back 40 years ago, most of our energy came from coal. And interestingly, if you go back 20 years ago, we produced as a nation about 30% more electricity than what we produce now. Now, about a third of that come from coal, about a third of that come from gas, and most of the rest of it come from nuclear. And what we've seen is this huge move away from coal, a large reliance on gas, and also not just gas that we had domestically. So 20 years ago, it would all come from the UK. Now, we import more gas than what we use domestically. The problem, that means we've got huge prices, and renewables aren't fixing the problem because the renewable cost, ironically, is set by the gas price. So we are being basically screwed across the country with the way the system's set up.
And to what extent is net zero adding to the cost of our bills, do you think?
And, well, you can't divorce the fact, Mark, that with gas being seen kind of as a clean energy compared to coal, when you have these COP climate agreements that go on every year, we've got more and more countries now across the world trying to buy gas on the world stage. And then that increases the demand for gas, which then pushes the price up for gas. And also, as I've just said, the way you set the gas prices of driving the renewable prices, we've got this issue, Mark, that a few weeks back with that big coal spell in the UK, we also had a wind drought at the same time. So that meant we were turning the gas right on because there wasn't enough wind and there was no solar in the evening. So net zero and this big shift over the last 30 years is a big factor in why energy prices are so high. And the sad thing is some people are dying out there because they're afraid to put the heating on.
What about the massive profits from these energy companies? I mean, is that an example of corruption? Are we being swindled?
Well, I've been calling this the kind of the great energy robbery because in 2019, as a nation, you take all the businesses, kind of all the public services and all the households, we spent about 40 billion across the whole year on our energy. Fast forward to 2022, that's 190 billion pounds. So that's 150 billion pound would fund the whole NHS for a year. You think of all those operations, we're going to pay to get things done. Most of that is like a wealth transfer to these foreign energy companies. Now, we've had Shell today coming out with their record profits, and people are saying, oh, well, we could tax them more, but only 5% of the Shell kind of money that they're talking about, the revenues, are from the UK. So you can't tax the other 95%. And the strange thing of what Shell's been doing as well is they haven't been paying much tax because they can offset some of the profits that they get by de-investing in the North Sea or kind of decommissioning kind of oil fields and gas fields. So we're not getting much money in at all. And that's the big problem when you've got all this foreign reliance.
And this windfall tax could be counterproductive if it means that energy companies don't explore for potential oil and gas fields on our shores.
And that's what we're going to see. We're going to see, oh, well, the tax is too high in the UK. Let's go and reduce our kind of exploration in the North Sea. What that means then is you've got to import more gas. And one of the winners, I suppose, over the last few years has been the US. They're importing more gas to the UK, a lot of it fracked. And what we got in this country, the UK, are banning fracking. It just doesn't make any sense.
So your prediction is that our energy bills won't correct downwards anytime soon?
I don't think they're coming down anytime soon. They will go up. It's already baked in to go up about 20% in April. Hopefully, they'll come back down a little bit more. But remember, we're never going to be going back to what we were paying pre-pandemic. And we've baked in basically this new, and ironically, the huge surge in the gas prices is the only thing that's made renewables actually look cheap in the long term.
The government have, the Bank of England have raised interest rates again today in order to tackle inflation. Is it your view that inflation has more or less peaked, and is it coming down?
Yeah, and all of it is linked to the energy price, the inflation. So the big driver of inflation over the last year has been the energy prices. About 3/4 of all the inflation in the country has come from energy, has come from the transport costs, and a bit from food as well. Now, because energy prices aren't going to go up as much this year as what they went up last year, and as you say, the wholesale price is coming down, so hopefully this year they'll start coming down. When you compare year-on-year prices of energy, they will be not as high as going up as last year, so that means that inflation will come down. It's why I'm quite critical of Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt saying the government policy is we've got plans to halve inflation. If they do absolutely nothing, Mark, inflation will halve. So it's not a government policy that's going to do this. It's just a correction the way the data is calculated.
Do they have a point that yielding to public sector wage demands could be inflationary, though?
That is a good point, because obviously if they yield and go in and say, right, we will give you 10, 11% pay increases, what that means is that they'll have to find the money for that, so potentially they'd have to tax it. And if it goes to the private sector, if they start having to follow the public sector because one sector will influence the other, that might mean then that companies will put prices up because of the fact that wages are going up. So we've got to ride this out. If we don't get these double-digit wage increases, that should see us through the best part of inflation. And I think we've peaked, and that's the good news for this year.
As always, you've done your homework. Jamie Jenkins, great to see you in the studio. Speak soon. Jamie Jenkins there, formerly of the Office for National Statistics. Do check out his excellent Twitter feed, Jamie Jenkins. Stats Jamie is how you can find him. Well worth a read. Next up, this is absolutely fascinating as our new monarch disappears from Australian banknotes. Is King Charles losing his grip on the Commonwealth? Is this his first major setback? Is it proof that he lacks his mother's Midas touch? Is he presiding over a monarchy in decline? We'll get the views of top royal insider Ingrid Seward, who knows the king well. See you in 2.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the show. Now, troubling news for our monarch. King Charles will not feature on Australia's new $5 note, according to the country's central bank. The new design will pay tribute to the culture and history of Indigenous Australians. A portrait of the late Queen Elizabeth does appear on the current design of the $5 note. So, is King Charles losing his grip on the Commonwealth? Is this his first major setback? And is it the first proof that Charles simply doesn't have the pulling power and the Midas touch or the appeal of his late great mother, Elizabeth? Is King Charles inevitably going to preside over a monarchy in decline? Well, to discuss this, I'm delighted to welcome Ingrid Seward, royal biographer and editor-in-chief of Majesty magazine. Hi, Ingrid.
Hi, thank you very much for such a nice introduction.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. This will be a disappointment to King Charles, won't it?
Well, actually, I don't think it will be, because this sounds crazy, but years and years ago, the very first time I met Prince Charles, we discussed, for some reason I can't remember, we discussed Australia. And he was saying that he felt there were too many royal visits to Australia, and that we really mustn't ever expect them to continue to be part of the crown. And if they wanted to break away and become a republic, that was fine by him. And also, Prince Charles is very into Indigenous people, and I think he might be quite pleased by the idea that they were going to, instead of replacing his mother with him, that they were going to replace it with pictures of Indigenous people. He would see that as a way forward.
Indeed,
so,
but it's...
That's my opinion. I don't think he will be upset at all. Also, the $5 note with the Queen on is not going to go out of circulation immediately. This is going to take a few years. And, anything could happen in a few years' time.
Of course, but, the Queen's great legacy, Ingrid, as you know, was the preservation and indeed the enhancement of and the enlargement of the Commonwealth. It's Charles's job to keep it together. By accepting this decision or even enthusiastically welcoming it, isn't he a turkey that's voting for Christmas?
Well, I think that Charles is actually a very modern thinker. I know we think he's an old fogey, but I think he's a very modern thinker. And I think he realizes that a lot of the Commonwealth countries had sort of said, we might become republics after the Queen has died. And of course, they probably want to support Charles. But I think he'd completely understand that there was a time for change. And the Commonwealth is very, very much the Queen's baby. And obviously, Charles wants to continue it. But I don't think he's going to be too upset. He wasn't upset about Barbados, for instance. I think he will just go with the flow on this one.
Indeed, although is it potentially evidence, if we see more stories like this, Ingrid, should we brace ourselves for the fact that nobody could replace the Queen and that he's essentially on a hiding to nothing following Elizabeth, and that the lustre of the monarchy is forever slightly diminished?
Well, I personally don't think that, but I'm sure, quite a lot of people do. Well, obviously, no one can replace the Queen because she had been there for 70 years, so long, and there's no way that Charles is going to be king for anything like that amount of time. So he won't have the same grandeur that the Queen had. He can never have that. But if you look at how he's been received so far, people seem absolutely delighted by him, and he's coming across as someone that's sort of broken out of a shell, and he looks relaxed. He's getting on with things. He's extremely busy. But this is something he's waited for all his life. And I think he's intelligent enough to realize that along the way, the world has changed a lot. So he will just deal with these things as they come and confront him.
Indeed, and counterintuitively, Ingrid, it seems that the king has, if anything, been boosted by the royal soap opera playing out across the pond.
Yes, I think there's been a huge amount of sympathy for him because I think a lot of people understand, parents and sons, they're not children, obviously, but, it's very, very difficult when families have these kind of problems. And Charles is wise enough, as I said before, to know that the minute he says anything, it's just going to exacerbate the situation. So he obviously feels that best thing is to keep quiet, however much it might irritate his younger son. And I'm absolutely certain that Harry will be or has been invited to the coronation because it's a religious ceremony. He's being anointed in the eyes of God. This is not the moment to have a fight with a member of your family or indeed even discuss the matter with a member of your family. Harry either comes or he doesn't. I see it as being very black and white there.
You've observed Charles at close quarters for a long, long time, Ingrid. Do you have the impression he's enjoying the role?
The impression he is really enjoying the role, which slightly surprised me. I thought he might find all the everyday munitions of the monarchy a bit tedious because he's so used to going out there, doing his own thing, raising money for his charities. But he seems to be, he seems to really be taking it in his stride, and he really looks as if he's enjoying himself. And, goodness me, he has to have all these receptions and, meetings that he never had to have before. But I think it's something that he's really embraced, I suppose, if that's the right word.
Definitely, and there seems to be a new Fab Four, don't you think, which is Charles and Camilla and William and Kate. They work brilliantly together.
Yes, I think perhaps that's an unlucky phrase, the Fab Four. Let's say that there's a new dignified four. Maybe, I don't know. But yes, they do seem to work brilliantly together because it's easier when there's less of you. It is easier to work together.
Ingrid, what a treat to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your contribution. Ingrid Seward there, of course, top royal expert and editor-in-chief of Majesty magazine and the author of several best-selling books about the royal family. Let's have a chat now with broadcasting royalty. Dan Wootton is live at 9 o'clock. Always unmissable. Hi, Dan.
Hello, Mark. Actually, we're continuing the royal theme a little bit tonight. Anne Widdecombe. I know you're a big fan, Mark.
Love Anne.
Regular on your show on Sunday nights. But she has a message to King Charles, a message that might surprise people. So she's going to be making a big pitch for that. Plus, we have the always irrepressible Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, our royal masterminds too.
Always unmissable. Dan is live at 9 o'clock. Can't wait for that. Thank you for your company this week. And I'm back on Sunday at 9 o'clock, 9 till 11 for Mark Dolan tonight. The lovely, wonderful Neil Fox is looking after my show tomorrow and Saturday. So I'll see you on Sunday at 9. Keep it GB News. And let me tell you that the weather is next.
Good evening, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update. Friday will be dry for the vast majority, some cloud, but some sunny spells poking through, and a pretty mild day as well. The reason high pressure is anchored just to the south of us, but it's not completely dry at the moment, far from it. Of course, northern Scotland's been a very wet day thanks to these weather fronts. They are now edging south and will ease down as they do so, but they're also bringing gusty winds for the next few hours. Of course, eastern Scotland and northeast England very blustery. The rain does fizzle as it sinks into southern Scotland and Northern Ireland, but a light rain and drizzle turning up in northwest England around dawn. To the south of that, most places dry, cloudy and very mild. 7 or 8 the low overnight. They're more typical of maxima at this time of year. Friday's weather then mostly cloudy with some rain early on over northwest England. Any early rain on the north coast of Northern Ireland should fizzle out, but another damp day in western Scotland, although the rain won't be as heavy as it has been through today, and it should ease off certainly by the afternoon along much of the west coast. Again, most of England and Wales dry. Quite a bit of cloud, but I'm hopeful for a few more breaks in the clouds. So some sunny spells, particularly eastern parts of Wales, southwest England, and it will be mild, 12, 13 degrees likely. As we go through Friday evening, again, most places just staying dry and cloudy, some drizzle at times on western coast and hills, particularly the Highlands, but I say generally a dry start to the weekend. Still a lot of cloud around, and we will see another weather front, another band of rain coming into the northwest during Saturday morning, and that'll spread across Northern Ireland by lunchtime, and then through the central parts of Scotland and into southern Scotland by the end of Saturday afternoon. Behind it, it turns a little brighter. For most of England and Wales, again, dry and cloudy, some drizzle over the hills in the west, and temperatures again above average, 11, 12, maybe 13 degrees Celsius. Look at the numbers for Sunday, though. We are going to see a dip in temperatures, turning cooler this weekend, but also plenty of sunshine on Sunday.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m.